We're kicking off a little earlier this morning at 7:30, and we may start doing these at 7:30 instead of 9:30. We seem to get a little bit better live audience at 7:30, which is good. So we want you guys listening. We want you guys watching to what we're doing, and we feel like we got some important stuff to talk to you about. So we want to make sure we hit you at the times when you're listening. So this chip talks is going to be interesting. So this one is on sugar, and sugar is absolutely killing us. We'll go down a few rabbit holes. I have this roughly laid out, so no telling where it might go. So I'll kind of take you down my little adventure of the mind, the chip mind, so to speak. But we're going to talk about sugar. We're going to talk about what it is. We're going to talk about what it does. We're going to talk about it in relation to carbohydrates, everything, right? So let's just dive right in because this is a super important one. If you guys are worried about your health, if you're worried about your children's health or your grandchildren's health, sugar, this is going to be a very important topic for you. I really want you to pay attention, because this is a thing that has been foisted on our society very purposefully and by industry. I mean, I can name 6 of the players right now just by going down the candy bar list, right? That are very big companies. Coke and Pepsi are very big companies. What is their product? Sugar. Sugar. Okay. All right. So let's dive in here. So there's several different types of sugar. So sucrose, glucose, fructose are all simple carbohydrates or simple sugars. So you will find all of those in nature in different things. Your body wants to basically break those down into glucose, which every cell will use for fuel, and fructose, which is part of use it as a signaling molecule and use it to start and stop things, let's say in the Calvin cycle, a major cycle in your body. So sugar is important to you. We'll get into the nuances here in a second, but the important thing is that I want you to just realize that sort of a carbohydrate, so to speak. Sugar these are the sort of natural sugars, okay? So sucrose, glucose, and fructose. They're produced by all green plants. And how does that happen? Well, plants fix carbon to create carbohydrates. And carbohydrates are all sugar, okay? So plants fix carbon in order to create carbohydrates, and all carbohydrates are sugar. Why are they sugars? Because they contain these molecules, sucrose, glucose, and fructose, okay? So this is a little bit confusing because the way that we're taught about food is all muddled, right? But you can think about any plant that's growing is going to produce carbohydrates, which are nothing more than sugars, okay? So I asked Google the question, are all carbs sugar? It said, yes. So every single carbohydrate is a sugar. Does that mean that you shouldn't eat carbohydrates? No. So we'll get into the nuances and differences here in a second. But, a stalk of celery, Cindy hates it when I say this because she's like, you're going to encourage people, you'll freak people out about eating good food. So should you eat celery? Yes. Why? Because of the fiber and the vitamins, and you do get a little bit of glucose in there, which you kind of need. But it's in the right form, okay? And what am I talking about right form? Well, processed sugar is something completely different than these guys. I mean, it's still sucrose or fructose, but it's processed. And what that means is, your cells want to, let's say, they can run on glucose, which is the sugar. So, but glucose is what they actually run on, but let's say sugar. So they can run on sugar, which is the least efficient fuel for a cell. And all cells will run on sugar. So a bacterial cell will run on sugar. A viral cell will run on sugar, and all your eukaryotic cells will run on sugar. But that's very inefficient. This is why when we eat, our bodies flip to the sugar mode, and it's 50 times less efficient. And so we lose some things. We sacrifice some things in order to eat, like our immune system, all right? But sugar is the most inefficient way to run a cell. The next sort of way to run a cell is fats, and fats are 50 times more efficient than sugar. So if I just feed you nothing but, let's say, celery sticks, okay, your body is going to break those down slowly over time, and you're going to pull out the beneficial glucose or sucrose, I don't know what's in celery, but the stuff that you'll eventually break down into glucose, let's say, from that celery, right? So, but it's going to take time. It's a processing event, and your body's going to kind of understand that you're doing work to get this little bit of glucose. Now let's compare and contrast that to processed sugar, where I just give you, let's say, a tablespoon of sugar, CNH, pure cane sugar. What happens then? Your body has to do no work, zero. That stuff, well, a little bit of work, but that stuff is just almost immediately pulled up into cells. And to cells, that looks like crack cocaine, okay? So if they have the option to run on light or run on fat or run on crack, they're gonna probably run on the crack. And that could be detrimental to you in certain instances. So this is part of why processed sugar is different, number one, and number two is bad for us, right? So as soon as I process the sugar, as soon as I make it molecular sugar, as soon as I take all the color out of it, I've really altered it, and it's now like a new drug. So what would be an analogy to this? The Peruvians, for many, many years, have chewed on coca leaves. Many years. Does it hurt them? No. Do they get addicted to them? I don't know, but a lot of them do it, and it doesn't appear to be a problem. You don't hear about the coca leaf problem in Peru, do we? However, if you take those coca leaves and you refine them, you process them into something called cocaine, then that becomes a drug that's addictive, that's different than the coca leaf. So this is what we're talking about. So, like, for instance, eating a beet is different than eating processed sugar that came from a beet. You guys following along with me? Very important stuff, okay? So when we eat processed sugar, and it's processed sugar that's very, very bad for us, we need natural sugars. We need fats more than we need natural sugars, and we need amino acids more than we need natural sugars, but we do need some natural sugars. This crap is like cocaine. I mean, you might as well call this cocaine. It's cocaine, right? It's not coca leaf, it's cocaine. All right, so has the sugar industry done anything to manipulate your heart and mind here? Well, it's a great story, really. One of the guys who was instrumental, let's say, in demonizing medical marijuana is a guy named Roger Adams. So Roger Adams was hired in the 1940s by the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, the national organization going after drugs, demonizing anything that pharma wanted them to demonize. But anyway, he's the guy that was hired by the Federal Bureau of Narcotics to characterize Indian hemp or medical marijuana. He theorized THC, discovered CBD, discovered all the minors, THCV, most of the minor cannabinoids were discovered by Roger Adams. Then the military came to Roger Adams and went, Roger, can you weaponize it? And so Roger methylated the THC molecule and created something called THCO acetate, which you can find on convenience store shelves in Texas. But that was a weapon a weaponized version of marijuana. Later in the 50s, the sugar industry came along and said, Roger, can you demonize fat? And Roger did. I think they paid him 50 grand in the 50s, which was a lot of money. But anyway, the sugar industry completely manipulated all these heart studies to demonize fat, right? So, we've cholesterol and fat, and that's horrible for your heart, and bad, right? Well, no, you run on fat. Too much saturated fat is bad. Too much of anything is bad, but too much saturated fat is bad. But saturated fat is the fuel, in every single mitochondria in your body. So it's your gasoline. So it's good stuff. Just too much of it's bad, and we need to balance our fat, right? So we need to understand and be more intentional about what we're eating and understand what we're putting in our face holes, right? So fat is good, but you need to understand about fat. McDonald's is bad. That's bad fats. Polyunsaturated fats, we need in equal balance, omega-3, omega-6, and then we also need to eat as much monounsaturated fat as we eat saturated fat. And they're proper balances and ratios of all that. We've done lots of chip talks on those. I won't go down that rabbit hole. However, in the 50s, what I want you to know is that, again, people were paid, bribed to promote sugar over fat, to lie to you. Yes. They really did lie to you. They really do lie to you. So, what about refined sugars? Now, interestingly, if you just go do Google searches and stuff on sugar, you're going to get a bunch of, cells run on sugar and it's good stuff. If you Google search on processed sugar or refined sugar, you will find a completely different set of information. Isn't that interesting? So, refined sugars may increase your risk of obesity, type 2 diabetes, and heart disease. Oh, but I thought Roger Adams said it was all fats. No, it's not all fats, it's sugars. Sorry. Eating these foods regularly leads to weight gain and other problems. It means that you are going to experience that sugar spike. And if that happens consistently, it can contribute to obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and other chronic conditions. Yeah, sugar. Okay. This is from the Mastering Diabetes website. So, can you get diabetes from eating too much sugar? So, natural sugars have check marks, and they're found in plants and are excellent for your body. Natural carbohydrates from fruits and plants are one of the best sources of nutrition you can put in your body. Now, not so much for the sugar, but more for the vitamins and trace minerals that are in them and the fiber. You need some natural sugar, as this is indicating, but not nearly as much as we have in our diet. Refined sugars, synthesized and artificial and designed to make foods taste unnaturally, addictingly good. Refined sugars in the foods they are typically added to are high-risk food for obesity, heart disease, and diabetes. Now, again, why isn't there an all-hands-on-deck on this? I mean, how many people are dying of obesity, heart disease, and diabetes? Why isn't sugar eliminated? We were quick to eliminate HCQ, weren't we? We were quick to eliminate ivermectin, weren't we? But yet we have this in our food supply. And literally, if you go back to the recipes that, my mom was taught, that these ladies were taught in the 50s, if you go to, look at recipes, every recipe, teaspoon of sugar. Why? Sugar doesn't need to be in chili. Why is it in chili? Yeah. Does sugar cause inflammation in the body? People with diets rich in refined sugar may be increasing their risk of chronic inflammation. Research suggests that when people eat and drink less sugar, inflammatory markers in their blood decrease. Could it be this easy? Yes! Again, part of what's wrong with this is bacteria. The bacteria eat the sugar. The other thing that's wrong with this is all this sugar that we have in our diet. It's just literally killing us. We can't. Oh, I spelled inflammation wrong, didn't I? Huh. Let's see if we get the same thing. Ah, we do. All right, cool. Always interesting to see what Google does. I don't know if you guys have ever played the Google game before. Let's see, what would be a good one to... I don't want to do it right now. We'll do it as a chip talk sometime. So there's stuff that if you go ask Google, if you sort of give Google words, it will mislead the crap out of you. I mean, it will take you down a completely different rabbit hole. If you go to another browser and do the same thing, you'll get kind of, I don't know, probably still altered information, but it won't be the same as Google. But it's just a way to illustrate how much of information is controlled depending on the questions that we ask here. Okay, so now sugar we know is bad, right? So we've investigated that and we've seen that. Now, why is sugar bad? Well, they kind of, in processed sugar, what they do is they take all the color out of it and they kind of strip all the ions out of it. So sugar is a very dead thing. It's a crystal. It ends up being a crystal, but it's not real electric. And if you put it in water, what you're going to have is that it's super soluble in water. It's more soluble in water than salt. And why is that important? Well, what percentage of you is water? Hold on. What percentage of a human is water? 60%. So 60% of you is water. So again, if you're dissolving things in you because you can, because 60% of you is water. Why is 60% of you water? Because you're electric. You have to be ionic. Every single mitochondria in you generates energy by moving ions around. So you're ionic. Ions don't really move through fat. They kind of move around fat. But ions will move through water, and water can be ionic. So that's why 60% of us is water, because we're electric. And this whole electric side of us hasn't really been explored yet, which is really, really cool. And a whole new area for bright young minds to dive into. There's lots of ways to influence you and your electromagnetic field, which you certainly have. But one of the ways to dampen it down, to shut her down, Billy, is to fill you with a bunch of processed sugar. Because I can't move ions through sugar, at least in the same way that I can through salt, right? So best thing I can do for you is make you a little salty. So you want to be salty, and our bodies are really good at maintaining a very, very tight salt window, right? So I can't remember what it is, but it's like if you get too high, you're going to get sick in some ways. If you get too low, you're going to get sick in some ways. So that salt window is really tightly controlled in our body by something called aldosterone, which is a breakdown of cholesterol. However, I can influence that by giving you processed sugar, because processed sugar is very soluble in water, and that's going to dampen down your electric ability, my ability to make you electric. That's going to shut you off, let's say, from the sun. The energy that you should be receiving from the sun. Hopefully that makes sense. This is sort of a big point, of this whole talk, is sugar's bad for the obvious reasons that we know, because it causes inflammation, causes diabetes, causes all these things. Now, why does it cause inflammation? If you rub CNH pure cane sugar on your skin, does it inflame you like a poison ivy would? No! I have my clippers in my hand, sorry. I always play with things. But why then would it inflame you on the inside? What's the difference? Are you more sensitive on the inside? No, not really. It's because of the bacteria and what the processed sugar does with and for the bacteria. Anyway, just, it's always all about the bacteria. Sugar, like the bacteria, that lights them up and they'll inflame you because they're excited. Okay, so you are electric. This one over here, the one with the sort of the electromagnetic human, the human in a globe, if you will, the human in a torus. I really like this one. That is sort of the way I envision what we look like. And you've got a field that extends from you about 8 feet, believe it or not. It's more intense the closer you are to your body, but it extends out about 8 feet. So technically, if we were paying attention and we were sensitive to it, we should be able to use this electric field as a sensor array. So we should be able to sense things at a distance. Now, this is something that the Russians started playing around with in the 1900s, and they're way, 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 way further along in this area than us United States of Americans. They've been messing with this for a long time, and they've had some, let's say, government interventions which slowed them down and messed them up. But the scientists that were working on this have, let's say, continuously, for the most part, been working on it since 1900. And they have some really cool technology that can measure this. They've got, experiments that kind of prove that this exists. But it's pretty cool. And if you're aware of it, we were sort of taught that, like ESP, let's say, oh, it's a gift. Either have it or you don't. If you don't have it, so sorry. But oh, look at all these cool people who do have it, right? Well, that's not really the truth. Again, we all have this field. It kind of depends on your nutrient, kind of depends on your behavior, kind of depends on your belief and your spiritual views of how, kind of strong or weak this field is. But we all can increase or decrease the strength of this field. So, someone might be particularly gifted at being sensitive to this field, but we all have this field, and we all can, let's say, influence this field for the positive or the negative. So there you go. What I'm saying is you're as psychic as anyone else. You just need to be aware of it. You need to understand what influences this field. And it's the heart mainly, but it's also, a lot of other kind of things in us. But our heart is what is creating frequency all the time, isn't it? So, yeah, right in line with the earth, kind of, which is kind of cool. All right, so this one's painful for most of us, but I just want to make this point. I made it a little bit with the cocaine analogy over here, but I want to kind of continue to make this point. So again, the analogy is in Peru for a long time they've been eating coca leaves. Coca leaves they give you energy. They kind of give you that, let's say, cocaine feeling a little bit, but they're non-addictive. They don't cause a lot of health problems. I'm sure people abuse them, but it's probably very rare in Peru. But if you take those coca leaves and refine the cocaine out of them, that makes a very, very strong, isolated molecule that's very addictive and very damaging, and has killed some of my best friends. All right, so it's a horribly addictive drug. If I do the same thing with sugar, if I take a beet, that beet in and of itself is fine. It's not going to hurt me. The sugar in there is my body understands how to deal with. I'm going to be able to deal with it just fine. But if I process the sugar out of that and create that isolated sugar molecule, that's going to be analogous to cocaine, okay? So that's going to do different stuff in my body. That's going to be a lot more bioavailable. It's going to be a lot more readily accessible to cells, and my cells are just going to literally prefer that over anything else, as will the bacteria. And again, the bacteria love this in the same way. Cells are cells. It doesn't matter if they're in a bacteria or you. And this is like crack cocaine to cells. So hopefully you guys are getting that. There's a lot of judgment in the world. Let's just put it this way. We won't go to the religious place. We'll just go to the judgment place. So there's a lot of judgment in the world. It's funny. I believe I kind of have let's say, a message or a mission, if you will, that's godly. I feel like I'm touched by God, and that the knowledge that I have to teach you is of God, and I feel that very strong with a connection and with everything in my being. Well, I want to go teach my message somewhere, and the best place to do that is to, pile on to someone else's situation, right? So I've had some conversations about that, with some churches, let's just say. And they always want to kind of put me over because I talk about the endocannabinoid system and I talk about kind of food as health and all this, and they look me up and then they see, I was a cannabis activist. And so the last conversation that I had, they wanted to put us in like an addiction group, which I thought was really, really interesting. I'm like, yeah, you guys aren't getting this at all. We'll just wait till later. We'll talk again in 5 years or so. Maybe the Great Awakening will have, waken us all up by then. But the point of that is that preacher eats cookies. That co-pastor eats cake. We all eat sugar. We are all addicted to sugar. And let's not judge, boys and girls. Let's not judge. Okay, so I wanted to kind of give you guys this one. Let's see. Yeah, that's a better picture. So I found the picture with that. I wanted to just use this picture. So this is a picture of, I think, the St. Louis World's Fair. But I wanted to grab a picture of around 1900, and I wanted to show you guys something. Because if you look at crowd pictures now, I mean, if you look at the beach where people are generally a little bit more fit and healthy, then it won't be quite as bad. But if you look at a picture of, let's say, New York City sidewalk, or, any crowd shot now, Disney World opening, you're going to see a lot of overweight people. A lot of overweight people. But when you look at this picture, how many overweight people do you see? Very, very, very few, right? I mean, I would have to go through with a micro. What are those things called? Microscope. No, not a microscope. A magnifying glass. Yeah, that. Would have to go through with a magnifying glass and really look at this to see if we could identify obese people. But do this for yourself. Just, go back and pictures from the 1800s, the early 1900s, people weren't obese. And why? They're really processed food and processed sugar and pharma. I mean, those are the big changes, right? These people look way healthier than we do right now. They look way fitter than we do right now. They have better skin tone than we do right now. They're able to grow facial hair. They all wore natty hats, which I find is interesting. And again, if you look at trying to kind of contain your electric or magnetic field, then that is a little bit interesting. This fella down front doesn't have a natty hat on. In fact, none of the guys down front have natty hats on. That's kind of interesting. Anyway, but go review old pictures for overweight versus not overweight. And again, you'll quickly come to the conclusion that we're a lot bigger now than we were. And why? It's probably the amount of processed sugar that we have in our diet. All right, so hope you guys enjoyed this one. Again, stay away from processed sugar. That's just the biggest message. It's very difficult to do. I would say I'm addicted to processed sugar. It's hard to get out of your diet. I ate some last night. But I'm aware, of it, and I know I'm doing something bad when I'm doing it. So that's the main thing that we want to do, is to increase your awareness and just, let you know the damage that you're doing. So when I was 8, I didn't know what that birthday cake was doing to me, so I ate a lot of birthday cake. But now I'm 62. Yeah, I'm that old. And I know the damage that it's doing to me. So I eat less birthday cake now, definitely. So anyway, that's what I want you to do. I want you to wake up. I want you to begin to realize how bad processed sugar is for you. I want you to understand the difference between the sugar in a beet or the sugar in a celery stick or the sugar in any grown natural carbohydrate versus processed sugar, because there's a big difference, a big difference. So anyway, avoid the sugar, especially the processed sugars. Things like, I didn't really say this. So date sugar is a natural sugar. Coconut sugar is a natural sugar. Maple syrup is a natural sugar. Honey is a natural sugar. So all of those your cells like. Your cells will sort of go through normal processes there, break them down in a normal way. Again, you don't need to be eating that stuff all the time, obviously, but those are good ways to sweeten things. Stevia, it turns out, is also a really, really good way to sweeten things. Someone asked me to look at a natural way to do what that drug Ozempic does. So a lot of people are injecting that, or having their physicians inject that Ozempic drug for weight loss. So I start looking at kind of what we can do naturally, and it turns out stevia, which is sweet, it's a sweetener, is very, very good for weight loss, and it's very, very good. It helps the pancreas, it helps B cells basically produce insulin, which is kind of cool, and that's a little unusual for a sweetener. So there are things out there that you can eat. It's not like, oh, I'll never eat anything sweet again. Yeah, eat a banana, right? So there's lots of sweet things out there that you can eat without eating processed sugar, all right? Processed sugar be like cocaine. So coca leaf to cocaine, sugar beet to sugar. Same difference, same analogy. Love you guys. We'll see you next